Mike and John in the morning, our COVID-19 radio town hall, and we're joined now by State Senator Lana Theis. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
Hey, thanks for joining us this morning. I know your concerns, and you're doing some things about online schooling during the coronavirus or COVID-19.
Obviously, with kids home, parents trying to deal with that situation, looking for online resources, and hoping to keep their kids up to date. You put out a press release, a statement over the weekend after the Department of Education had announced that students receiving online instruction during the shutdown will not be able to count it towards required annual instructional time, and that was not something that sat well with you. Talk about that.
Frankly, it hasn't sat well with almost anybody, including the superintendents and school districts I've talked to who have been doing Herculean work. It is amazing what the school districts and the teachers are doing across the state to try to make sure that the kids continue to be educated, and to have the leadership in the Department of Education come out with something that effectively said all your efforts come to naught. I found beyond frustrating, and our governor did too. She said she was dismayed by that. So we are working together to try to make sure that all of these efforts will not be for naught, that we will do everything we possibly can to continue to keep our kids being educated through this unprecedented crisis.
So
we're doing our best.
So the Department of Education, specifically the Deputy Superintendent Vanessa Kiesler, the issue that she brought up in her memorandum was that there's an equity issue here in that many students, especially in lower income districts, do not have online resources available to them at the same rate or the same level as other students. So this becomes an equity issue, and thus this is why the State Department is not going to allow that. What's your answer?
So I absolutely understand where she's coming from, and I agree that all of our students, no matter where they're coming from, their education absolutely needs to be addressed. To think that the only possible way that we can educate kids is through using technology would be absolutely inappropriate. There are a lot of paper distance learning processes going on right now. And to say that if we can't do anything, we should therefore do nothing, or if we can't do it equally for everybody, we should therefore do nothing for anybody, that's falling to the lowest common denominator, and zero is not where I want to be. I want to provide the absolute best education that we can to as many of the kids as possible, understanding that some are not going to be able to have that access, and then making sure that we're making accommodations in every possible way. And there's federal guidance advising us to do this. Other states are doing it. To say that we can't would put our kids even further behind, and I'm not willing to do that. I'm going to work my tail off to make sure that we're educating to the best of our ability and moving forward, and perhaps this will be the launching pad for us to even move further and move ahead of where other states are at.
Do you think this could eventually end up turning into, once we get through all this and kids are allowed to return back to school now, at this point, who knows, it may go to summer break. Do you think there will eventually be like a full state possibility of year-round schooling with the breaks set up a little differently than they are now?
That is absolutely one of the things that are being discussed. My personal preference is that we're going to be able to allow the districts themselves to be able to decide eventually what that looks like. Obviously, what we're going to need to do in the short term is provide them a few different options in the process so that we can get our kids educated. But for us to turn around and say, okay, well, we can't do it right now, so therefore we should do nothing. Let's just ignore the next 6 months of education, and then we'll come back in the fall. That doesn't seem like a good answer to me. And our teachers aren't doing that. Our school districts aren't doing that. And again, I want to hail them. It is amazing what I'm hearing them do.
Well, and are the teachers, are they getting taken care of financially as far? Are they getting paid like they normally would for those that are teaching and reaching out to their students and answering questions and things and helping parents in the teaching methods while we're shut down here?
The schools have were funded, and then the teachers all have contracts, so all of that is ongoing. The ones that are in question right now are the ones that are the janitors, for example, the parapros, and those are the existing contracts with the local units that were all worked out, and that is an issue that we need to speak to further, whether federal help is coming in for that, state help. The state has a different perspective on all of this funding. We can't operate in a deficit. So where the federal government can say, we'll just make this up later and go further in debt, the state doesn't have that option. So we need to make sure that the dollars that we're providing are actually in our coffers And we are providing unemployment for way more people than we have ever done before.
All right, so specifically, and I think this to what you were just talking about, we heard from Bridget, who contacted us through Facebook and asked, will Senator Theis take a stand to support teachers and school staff by promising they'll continue to get paid through the mandatory shutdown? Now, as you mentioned before, the schools were funded, and they have contracts for the teachers, specifically the teachers that have, or the other staff that have contracts. But if this crisis goes on past the funding level from the state, what happens there? And then also, she asks, will you support waiving M-STEP?
Yes, we can't. You can't provide a mandatory test when you can't test the kids. So I'm with that. Another issue is the third grade retention. You can't retain a child that hasn't had the opportunity to be taught. Those are all issues I actually have. I had 8 meetings yesterday. I have probably 4 or 5 actually scheduled today. We are beginning to address those issues. With respect to the teachers, they have existing contracts already in place. We as legislators are not able to speak into and change existing contracts. I can't tell a teacher that she has to work 10 more hours than her contract already says she has to work, or he. The governor's executive orders have significantly more power than what the legislature has to do to speak within existing contracts.
Do you expect that?
I'm not a lawyer.
Do you expect that there'll be an order just forgiving the missed days? I mean, right now they're still under the, that there's a certain number of instructional hours that have to be provided. That's going to have to get waived, correct?
Seat and hour time waivers are an option. Actually, our Department of Ed director has that power within his the statutory authority right now through innovative teaching, and chose not to use it. So I'm going to put that out there. And they also have much more history with respect to what the layout should be for that. We are, as a legislature, are sitting down trying to figure out what the layout should be for that. When you say forgive, I want to understand what it is that you're specifically referencing, because, again, it is not okay to me that we look at our kids and say, okay, let's not educate for the next 6 months, and then let's start again in September. And some people, by forgive, mean let's just not educate for the time being, and then we'll just worry about getting back later.
Well, and that's why I was asking.
What some people mean is let's take a look at the limitations of the contract and go from there. And I think we are absolutely taking a look at the limitations, the seat time waivers, the 75% waiver, the 75% requirements. We're absolutely looking at that. And we have to work within the landscape we've been given, but nobody has a crystal ball.
So I think it's that, many people think that somehow the legislature, or it can just rule by fiat. In other words, you can just say, make this happen. But there's so many balls in play. There's so many different spheres of influence that have to be accommodated in this process.
Absolutely. And again, with the primary point being the goal of the education department, the goal of our educational system is to educate children. And you've heard me say over and over again that our state government has 3 primary responsibilities. One of those is public education. So where we fund an awful lot of things, my preference is that we focus on 3 things: public safety, public infrastructure, and public education. And public education, when I say it last, is just because I want to emphasize that. That is the point that is what our state is supposed to do. It goes back to our founding, and it's a focus that I found all of our other legislators have too.
Okay. State Senator Lana Theis, Chair of the Senate Education Committee, thank you. We could, again, go on and on this, but we have limited time, so we're going to move on to our next segment. Thank you for joining us. We will be talking to you more about this. So, again, thank you, State Senator Lana Theis.